ready? Season 2. I'm very excited.
Samesies.
Alrighty. Well, let's talk about our peaches and pits. Why don't you go first?
So, my pits is that our fall activity schedule um, quickly fell into shambles with no control. I had everything lined up perfectly, so we were only at activities 2 days a week. It was going to be great and lovely. And then a bunch of stuff had to get moved around because of other conflicts and no longer offering a certain class. And so now we have activities every single day of the week, which it's
That's
only going to be until the end of October.
that's not awful. That's not
It's
awful.
not
If it
awful.
makes you feel better, yesterday Hudson sprung on me that he really wanted to be doing fall baseball.
Oh,
So we might be adding that into the mix.
love that for you.
Yes, yes. So what's
Yeah.
your peach?
My peach is yesterday for a full 8 hours. Every single linen in my home was clean, other than what we were wearing. That literally
It's
never
amazing.
happens. So that was like I just like soaked in those couple of hours and
Right.
it was
That's a
great. I mean,
whole day. That's
the
a
fa-
whole business day.
it really is. For a family of six, it's insane to,
Yeah, we never have
yeah,
everything like
no,
unfolded.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that's
What about
amazing.
you?
I will say that my peaches, we got new windows put in on our main floor today, which, I'm not looking forward to paying for. However,
Yeah.
getting them done, particularly on the backside of our house, is like the final, like, structural thing that needs to get done in order.
I lost Caitlin. Welcome back.
Thanks. It's still recording.
It is still recording. I almost turned it off because I was like, because you left, and I was just like, oh, and there goes
That's
Caitlin.
it. That's the end. She's
I know.
thrown her computer across the room. And the podcast is over. Um, so anyway, getting them done on the backside of the house, that is like the last step to getting our sunroom done and structurally usable. So very pumped about
Yay.
that. It's been 3 years in the making.
Yeah.
And my pit today is all of the massive technology problems I had just to like get here and hit record. And I just got kicked out and got hopped back in, but my mic's not plugged in because I had to move to my laptop. So shit like that annoys me.
Yay.
But I'm gonna let it go
You're going to let it go. I
very
like it.
convincingly.
So you have the
Oh, the Spitfire.
Spitfire.
So the other day, Tuesday, I picked Caroline up to take her to volleyball, and I we're pulling up to the stoplight to turn left into the Y. And Caroline goes, "Why did you take the wrong way to get here?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forget that your guys' street, like, I could just take all the way through over. So I
Hmm.
was like, "Yeah, I guess, yeah, I always forget that." So I guess I took the long way. It probably added like an extra minute.
The scenic route.
Yes. And Nora goes, "Yeah, my mom doesn't know how to drive." And I was like, "Well, your taxi ride ends here, ladies. Why don't you
Yeah.
go ahead and let yourself out? And I hope you enjoy your nice walk home straight
Yeah.
down the street,
The right way.
the right way."
You're out of control.
So, what is your partner praise?
So last week was Nebraska Volleyball Day in
Mm.
Nebraska. So for those out of state listeners, we beat several records, NCAA, national and world record because the Husker volleyball team played at Memorial Stadium, their football team, or their football stadium. It was amazing and so wonderful, and it just made me want to shout, "Go women!" Um, but that's beside the point. So we had tickets for the whole family. Um, Everything quickly devolved. And so Jesse sacrificed himself essentially to stay home with those that didn't work. And so then me, Charlotte, and then a set of friends were able to go. And so that was really, really kind of him. And he said that, yeah, both of us wanted to go, but like it would mean more for you to be there to Charlotte than for
Yeah,
me to go. And I was like, oh, you're so sweet.
that is very sweet. I like that. Way to
Yeah.
go.
Way to go, Jess.
Way to go. High five. I'll say my partner praise is that as you can see, I'm in a new setting and we swapped living rooms. So now I have like a dedicated office room, which was Eric's idea.
Mm,
So part one, yay for that. And then um, our new living room, where my office formerly was, didn't have any ceiling lights. Our house was built in the 70s, and they apparently didn't think that like ceiling lighting was important. And so he has been diligently working to put in lights and fans and everything to make that like a usable room on the regs.
nice.
So it's obviously saving us a ton of money because hiring somebody to come and do that for us would cost a lot. And so I appreciate
Right.
he's handy and he's taking it on. And because our house is old, there's always problem solving to
Yeah,
do. So
for sure. Go, Eric.
go, Eric. Better you than me. I would not trust
Right?
myself to do any electrical work in
Oh,
our
thank
house.
you. Yeah.
Alrighty, so today we are talking the patriarchy. I'm so excited about this
I
episode.
know.
So actually, this was an episode that we thought about. We had on our list to do last year or last season. Last year, God,
Last year.
the summer feels so far away already.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it just felt like it needed more like space and research and thought behind like how we put it together, so it got bumped to season 2. And so I'm really excited for us to like dive into this today. And I will say this is the disclaimer for it. This is not like a fuck the patriarchy, white straight men suck episode.
No, not at
No,
all.
not at all. It's supposed to be an acknowledgement and a discussion of the facts. And the facts are that, I mean, really, the patriarchy exists. And by nature, it oppresses women and people of color. And it needs to be radically reformed
Yes.
or just made into something new altogether.
Right.
And the way that I think about it and I look at it, because I know this topic gets really politically charged for people in today's climate, is that really, and I have thought this like for a very long time, that society and institutions are really like they're made to evolve as we learn. And I think we have learned enough about the patriarchy that makes it clear that a lot about it needs to change. So to be fair as well, I think outside of the economics of the patriarchy that men obviously benefit from the most, I would say that it doesn't actually serve white men or men at all that well either. I think it's actually a huge disadvantage for them, which, we dive into, but
Yes.
I am excited for this episode and to finally be putting it together. So
Yay.
yay. All right. A quick like history lesson here. So what exactly is a patriarchy? And I think as I was kind of researching, it felt really important to define this because it sort of seems like this like enigma, right? Like we talk about it all the time and people like say it, but it's kind of like, what is it exactly? So to be like very clear, and this is an oversimplification, but it's the idea that men have more power and dominance and privilege than women, and they hold positions of power, and women are less valued. Therefore, they end up oppressed. And the idea of the patriarchy and the social structure really infiltrate our daily life. So the examples of this kind of range from like pretty benign, like a woman taking a man's name at marriage and their children then getting that surname passed on to them versus the woman's, against something like men holding most of the executive positions in companies and in the government. So then they make decisions based on their worldview, which is generally to the detriment of women and minorities. So obviously, there are some parts of the patriarchy that we take bigger issues with than others. But also, in general, the rationale or the values like rational thinking are prioritized over emotions. It's primarily white and heterosexual. I don't know why I said that like that. And as such, behaviors for both men and women are policed based on the social construct of those ideas and those values. And so that's kind of how it all comes together. So, what does this have to do with the mental load? The patriarchy obviously built and maintains the systems that we have today in our society. And those, as we are all well aware of, and has been really revealed, as we've talked about in the past through the cracks in COVID and things like that, it's really coming to light. It doesn't support women and it doesn't support families in general. And it also steers men's behavior in a way that doesn't support modern family life. It really leads to deeply unsatisfied relationships on both sides of the equations, but for very different reasons. And so it really kind of lays the foundation, I think, for the mental load. So we'll kind of discuss later on why we think the patriarchy doesn't actually serve men very well. But in society, generally, you see the patriarchy at work when you see the hierarchy of power that puts white men at the top and everybody else kind of underneath that. So, sorry, I don't have my glasses on, so I'm trying to. Hold on 1 second. Let me get my reading glasses out.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, nothing has made me feel older tonight than that
In
moment.
that moment.
So I think this is something that, as women who like feel the effects every day, we think about on a regular basis. But do you think the average man thinks nearly as much about how the patriarchy affects their lives as those who mother in American culture do?
Absolutely not.
That seemed like this seemed obvious.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I think that the modern man um, probably thinks about it more than their fathers did.
Mhm.
But I still don't think that it's nearly at the forefront of their mind like it is ours.
Yeah.
Because they don't, I mean, they benefit through all of their patriarch, I'm going to get through this. Through, they've reaped all the benefits, you know?
Yeah.
And then, and we were oppressed, and I mean, even science says you're more likely to remember negative than positive. So
It's scientifically proven.
it's proven.
Yeah. I would agree. I don't think, and so at the end of this conversation, the question that I'm going to put it out now and I want to circle back to it at the end is, as we kind of discuss the patriarchy, its effects, and we essentially make the case for why it's not serving anyone well, but especially families. Do you think it is something, because at the end of the day, it's the ace in the hole for men, right?
Right. Right.
So is it something that they are, as a society, are we ever going to collectively try to change it and reform it and build something new? Do we ever see, so after this whole conversation, that's my question at the end, is do we ever see a day when collectively men are like, I'm cool if I give up this ace in my pocket to make a better society for everyone? Because it exists other places in the world. You
Right.
see, you know, you see it especially like in the Nordic countries where they, kind of at the same time in history, um, our countries sort of reached the same cultural turning point, and we went left and made policy that hurt women and families, and they went right and really made it culturally ingrained and legislated for families. And you,
Right.
you see the difference in the cultures and the happiness and just kind of the overall health and wellness of families and relationships and everyone in them. So
Right.
that
I mean, it's an example that it can and does work.
hmm hmm I so
Yeah, I
fascinating.
won't answer yet.
That's what we're gonna get to by the end of the episode. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't end up answering it. It'll be our own opinion anyway.
Right.
So I felt like also too we couldn't really like discuss the patriarchy without kind of discussing feminism, and it's it's interesting. So okay, so here's the definition of feminism that I found. And it says many forms of feminism characterize patriarchy as a present day unjust social system that subordinates, discriminates, and oppresses women. Feminists often view patriarchal ideology as the root cause of gender inequality. And obviously we've talked about gender inequality in the past and how it
Right.
affects the mental load and families and the men and women in those relationships and households. But it was interesting because, us being of a certain age, raised, I don't want to say that. That makes us sound old.
In our
Having
30s.
those of us in our 30s, um, like in the 90s, and I would venture to say even like in the 2000s, I feel like when I was in like high school and going into college, like feminism was such like a people were like, "Ew, you're a feminist?" Because it was all like, "Oh, you're like one of those bra burning women."
Right. Right. It felt like it was almost like it was masculinicized. Is that a word? I don't know. It was like they made women who cared about women men in a bad way.
Mhm.
Or like that was like the energy behind it was like, oh, you're a feminist. Like you hate men, but it was this really masculine energy that like the stereotype repeated. It's very strange.
It is very strange. And actually, as I was like typing this, because I was like, "Oh my gosh." I mean, like by that definition, I would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm 100% a feminist." It's never something that like I've super identified like one
Right.
way or the other. I think naturally I am, because obviously I care about a lot of the issues that the feminist movement. But as I was prepping the episode, I kind of caught myself being like, oh my gosh, that was like culturally ingrained in me. And like, even I was so scared to like type it out and be like, yeah, I mean, I would call myself a feminist, because we were just taught that that was like such a, you were crazy if you were a
Yeah.
feminist. And,
Right.
and then like, as I followed this like train of thought where I was like, oh my gosh, why does this like sort of have me taking pause and hesitating a moment? I was like, oh, we were just gaslit growing up. I was like, that's what it comes down
Right.
to be like, oh, I don't want to call myself that because that means I'm crazy and I'm emotional. And like, where else do you hear all that shit anyway?
Yikes.
That's the go-to trope for,
Right.
women's reactions to things. And so I was like, it was like a mind-blowing moment for
Yeah.
me to be like, oh,
Yeah.
that's I don't know. I don't know. I just felt like a very like a
It's
little
like
bit
a
of pain
self-feeding
as I
system.
went through that self-reflection.
Right.
All right. So bring this back to kind of the mental load, patriarchy, feminism, and kind of bringing it all back. There are obviously things that the mental, like this contributes to in terms of the mental load, the burden of childcare. As we all know, that generally falls to the woman in the house to arrange, keep on track, rearrange, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, obviously taking like appearing feminine by taking care of your children and like taking the reins on childcare is like a big no-no under the patriarchy. It shows up in the form of like sick days
Mm-hmm.
and drop off and doctor's appointments and like the all of the invisible work that generally we're taking care of
Right.
comes down to men being taught that those things make you less of a man
Right.
and therefore and I don't think going back to like the beginning of our conversation, I don't think my husband would be like, oh, if I take care of my kids it makes me like less of a man.
Right.
Um, but I think it's just kind of in those nuanced behaviors where like again, he wasn't raised to think that his value was in like maintaining a well-run household,
Right.
whereas we were.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, I don't think any, at least I would hope not, any guy is saying like, if I help rear my children, my like dick will shrink. But I can assure you, anybody who out there does believe that, it will not in fact shrink.
We can't have shrinking dicks. That
That's
would be a disaster for us all.
ah. But yeah, like it does, like it's acting feminine because we're taught that the women raise the children. And
Mhm.
because women are feminine, then if they raise children, it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense.
Right, right. And that's exactly how I felt kind of as I was looking through and I was like reading the articles and getting ready for this. I'm like, I to some degree I get it, which makes me feel a little bit insane.
You're right.
I don't agree with it. That's the main distinction. I guess I can kind of follow your logic. However, it seems deeply flawed,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
then we end up being, we're the default parent. We retain all the details around
Hmm.
all of the stuff and the things. And, it just
Being the default parent sucks sometimes.
it does. I mean, it sucks. It sucks all the time.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm ever actually like super happy when I find myself feeling
right.
that. But even something like contraception, and like it falls on us to find it, take it reliably, and so we don't end up
Yeah,
in a situation because we also don't have full bodily autonomy in most states in America anymore. And so, it's all of those things that,
right.
you start to kind of like add them up and even that, the idea of being like, oh, just even taking care of my own physical health, like that's obviously it's not something my husband can do for me. My husband can't like know how my body is feeling and book a doctor's
Right.
appointment or whatever.
I don't know. I
But
feel like I've done that for my husband. He's like, my tummy hurts. And I'm like, you should see a GI doctor.
That's because men suffer from man colds and like this general. Yes, what is it exactly? When we got back from vacation in Florida, Eric's foot was like, both feet were like swollen very badly. And he sat around for like 3 days before I was like, that's not good. Like, that's not normal. No one else on our trip, and there were 9 of us total because we went with another family. No one else came back with like super swollen feet that they can barely walk on.
It's a
Like,
patriarchy.
yeah, you should.
I mean, that's what's keeping them from going to the doctor, is they are
Right, well,
strong,
yes,
capable men.
they are strong, they are capable, and they never ask for help, even though they could have some like
Septus infection.
what even today, I mean, Eric went hunting over the weekend and I'm not going to pretend to know like a ton about it, but at any rate, the other last night and this morning, he was like, he has this weird, like, amoeba-y rash, like all over, like on his legs, on his arms. And he's like, oh, like this isn't normal. And it looks very angry. Like it's so bad. Um, and he was like, maybe I should go see a doctor because now that I think about it, I did fall in standing water, which is generally where like bacteria and like amoeba, like things that can like truly make you very sick.
Right. That's where all the brain eating amoebas live.
Yes. And he's like, maybe, but you know what he has not done?
Made an appointment.
Made an appointment. I think instead he's actually just going hunting again tomorrow.
I mean, if he already has it, he may as well go in, go out strong.
God, I can't. Please. So transitioning just a little bit, but kind of like keeping in this idea of the behaviors that like the patriarchy demands of men doesn't set them up for success in the household, right? Because they're taught like these harmful behaviors like you have to be strong and you're the provider and you don't ask for help and you're like you are in control and all these things. And so then like the flip side of that is that like you're not showing up in your house and helping clean. You don't know the details of like your child's medical history. So if you take them to the doctor and they're like, how many ear infections has your daughter had this summer? You're going to be like, I don't know.
I don't know. Let me call my wife.
Yeah, let me text her really quick. Like, he'll be like, a lot. And the doctor will be like, can you define that for me? Because
Is
it's the
that
difference.
3 or is that 9?
Right, right. It's the difference between like, do we need to schedule another tube surgery or do we not? Um, it also translates into like not emotionally supporting your wife and not emotionally supporting your children. And those things tend to feed off of each other in a very vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And so, what I thought was interesting is that millennial women cite the mental load as one of the main reasons that they get divorced, right? We showed
Right.
up in marriages thinking that it was going to be an equal partnership, and we get like not that.
Right.
I'm trying to think of a split that might not be offensive, but I can't. I don't know if I'm brave enough to say it. And so, then we're like, well, fuck, man. Like, if I'm
Right.
going to do most of this by myself
I may
anyway,
as well just do it by
I might as
myself.
well just do it by myself. Then at least I don't have to worry about how you feel about it, and I can
Right.
just make my own decisions. And so, do you think it's fair to say that the the gendered norms that the patriarchy instills in men actively holds them back from being productive in relationships, or is that too harsh of an assessment?
I don't think that that's harsh. I think that that's reality, and sometimes reality slaps
So,
you, and you need to just get over it. I mean, you can't, it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, you can't have the ace in your pocket and then also expect to have a balanced home life where
mhm,
you're right. Because, like, we've tried it, it doesn't work. You can't be a 100% employee, a 100% parent, and a 100% spouse all the time. It just, like, literally doesn't exist.
mhm,
So, I mean, where do your loyalties lie? Like, is it in your job or is it in this person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with? Like,
mhm,
so I think that really the patriarchy does a huge disservice for men when it
mhm.
comes to the home setting.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I would agree. I think as a society, we fail to set men up in a way that I mean, when you think about it, like the roles of both men and women in relationships really haven't evolved, right?
Right.
Like we are all still stuck in the setup of the 50s living in 2023. And so I mean
Right.
it doesn't work for anyone. But I think that it especially I have more empathy for men sometimes because at least what I kind of think to myself as like we kind of struggle through some of these changes, at least like I have I have emotional outlets. Like I have friends that I don't feel like weird going to and talking about anything under this, like it's all fair game. Like I have like an emotional support network. And so as much as it makes me want to like scream and as much as like it might create rage within me, I I have avenues and I have people that I can talk to about it. And then I think about like our husbands and I think, man, you are just like marooned on an island.
Yeah.
Nobody has set you up for success
Right.
in
It's hard
any.
to, I mean, it's hard at that point to like hold them accountable in the right here and right now, other
Mhm,
than making sure that both men and women are recognizing this is a
mhm,
problem and then
mhm.
working together to fix it.
And that is always sort of like an ironic addition to the mental load, right? Because you
Right.
have to like we see it, and I'm sure the men in the households see it as well, but probably not with as much clarity
Yeah.
as I
Or
think,
breadth.
yeah, as we do. And I don't want to like give us too much credit here, but it's always tricky to be like, I'm going to point something out to you because you got to do it in the right way and you have to do it in the right tone and at the right time. And you have to like manage their feelings through
Hmm.
it.
Right.
And it like ironically just sort of like adds to the list of stuff and things that you are constantly kind of thinking about. And I don't mean it to sound like our shit doesn't stink sometimes,
Right. Right.
but it's just, again, when you're not set up for success and taught how to be successful, like inside the household, there's just naturally like that catch up. It's like joining a team 3 weeks into the season and
Right.
you're like, oh shit, I have like, I've got a lot to catch up on here,
Yeah.
So interestingly, and I've linked this in the show notes because I think it's just a really like incredibly powerful TED talk, and I've heard it in various iterations. I first heard about it on a political podcast uh, shortly after Dobbs was struck down. And it's this gentleman named Tony Porter. And he had a TED talk about 13 years ago, but it's very relevant and still speaks on it today. And it's called The Man Box. And this is essentially like, it is the set of social constructs that men use to police each other's behavior. And so it's what they're taught from the earliest age. And then that's essentially like what they bring into a marriage and a household. And those are generally the behaviors that we tend to find problematic and contribute to the mental load. So essentially, he says that like men are taught to not be emotional except for anger. Anger is always acceptable. And that's often the way that you like strong arm people around you is through your anger. You don't show weakness, you don't show fear. You're always demonstrating control, even over the people around you. You're there to be a protector. You don't want to be like a woman. So you are heterosexual. You don't want to be like a gay man. You need to be tough. You don't ask for help. And you view women as property and objects. I think kind of that last one, I feel like generationally, I feel like
Yeah.
men we've married have like really moved past this. But the other stuff, you know, it's like, it just resonates so deeply. And he talks about how at a very early age, we like strip men of their close relationships because we, teach them that it's not okay to have feminine qualities. So don't do anything that makes you look feminine. So that would be caring about like your bro dudes too much.
Right.
Like, at a very young age, I think you said it was like as young as like 13 or 14, we start stripping boys of their relationship and like teaching them to hold their
Hold their
friend.
own.
Mhm. And like hold them at a distance.
Right.
Like, and then because on the flip side of that, if you hold them too closely, then you could be perceived as gay. And he's like,
Right.
and I remember hearing, and he used the phrase, he was like, you hear it all the time where like young boys will be like, love you, dude, no homo. Like it always has to have this qualifier. And I remember that. I don't know if that phrase is like as prevalent now. I would think probably not, just because again, I think like kids today have so much more exposure and are so much more accepting, and it's just so much more common than like when I was in high school. I remember guys in high school and in college saying that all the time.
Yeah.
Like you have to qualify yourself all the time.
Yeah. I definitely don't remember it in like my recent history, but for sure, high school.
No, I definitely could not like picture my husband going over to our neighbor's house and like, you know, giving Trey a pat on the back and being like, no homo. Like he would never, like that is like socially unacceptable for so many
Yes.
reasons.
Yes.
But that is, you know, even in as recent history as our husbands having been in high school.
Right.
I mean, 20 years ago was not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think I should have been out of high school for 20 years, but that's a different conversation. You know what I'm saying? But like 20 years is still modern history. And that
Absolutely.
was still like what they were
Raised in.
so trained to
Yeah.
do in that. So,
Well, and
and
the man box, I feel like, is patrolled in all aspects of their life too. So, like, not like this starts in childhood, but then they have male teachers and male friends. And so it's just like constantly reiterated to them over
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
over and over again.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
how you behave in the locker room. It's how you behave on your team. It's how you behave in the office setting. Like,
so like, why wouldn't they show up to a marriage behaving like that? Like, what, how
right,
could we expect any different?
right. So I think out of like all of that list, is there anything in there that like stands out to you and go and you go, they are all not great. However, like these ones are the most problematic. And I'm curious if it's like the same, if it
Hmm.
varies by household, like what do you think? And
Yeah.
how
So my
did it
first like
follow?
my first gut reaction is don't be emotional except for anger.
Mhm.
I am a relatively calm person, I would think. I would like to say so, that I have a pretty high tolerance and patience. And so, like, that jump to anger really, really bothers me.
Mhm.
And it wasn't a norm of mine when I was growing up, I would say. I would say that neither of my parents are quick to anger. And so, not being exposed to that as often, it really, like, ugh, when
Mhm.
it does
Mhm.
happen. Um,
It's
I think that it's the misplaced anger. Like,
yeah,
I think
it's
that you can be angry about something. I don't think that anger is an emotion you should avoid, because absolutely I get angry. But I think that the emotional maturity you have then helps you deal with that anger in a respectful, responsible way, where this anger that I'm talking about is like blind rage, screaming, yelling, going from 0 to 60.
right, right. Like there's the progress is very the progression of it is very fast. It's like
Yes.
I said the same thing 3 times in a row in quick succession, and you like still, your brain still hasn't finished processing what I've said, but it's too late. Like clearly
Yeah.
you weren't listening, and now like, and it's treating like every scenario with the same level of anger
Yes.
versus and again, like I would agree, it's not that like the situation doesn't warrant
Right.
frustration or irritation or anger, but even those things like are different than just like straight anger,
Right.
and you can't expect you can't police behavior, especially I feel like with children. You can't treat every offense with like the same level of anger,
Right.
because then I don't know if you are yelling at me because I'm about to accidentally push my sister down the stairs because I'm not paying attention, or because I um, knocked over, like I knocked a piece of paper off the table and you feel like I should have been paying closer attention or something.
Right. Right.
Like those two things are
Very different.
very different, but often get like the same
Yeah, the
reaction.
same reaction. And so yeah, I think that it's that just like blind rage, and the reaction piece is a really, really strong point. The other one that I think is a big problem is don't show weakness or fear. I think vulnerability is super important, and I don't think that you get anywhere in life without some level of vulnerability. And weakness and fear come hand in hand with
Mhm.
that. And so that bothers me from both the relationship with a spouse, but then also the relationship with a child. I think that in order to expect vulnerability out of them, and that comes out with honesty and responsibility, that like you also have to show that as a model of behavior. Like, I yelled, I lost my temper. Knocking that piece of paper down was not that big of a deal. I've had a really long day and I'm very sorry. I think
Mhm.
that that is a perfect example of showing what others would consider a weakness or fear, because you are admitting
Yeah.
to a fault, or at least
Mhm.
that's how I'm like processing it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. I think like on face value, I definitely took it as like, oh, like I am scared of, like maybe my mom is sick and I'm scared she's going to die, or, I'm sad. Like I took it at very much face value, but I love the way that you're interpreting it in terms of, because I think that is something that like it comes down to this idea, and I had this like noted as kind of a hot take to do. It's this idea that like we really do end up modeling for our kids, and when you can't accept, or you can't admit fault or a mistake or something like that, it doesn't really, your kids end up sort of like internalizing the opposite of what you want them
Yeah,
to get out of it. When you can't say like, hey, I shouldn't have yelled at you about that and I'm really sorry. And it doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't come with,
right,
but I had told you 3 times. Like
right.
when you can't just say like, you know what, even though I did tell you 3 times, when you can't have this dialogue with yourself. I told you 3 times. But you know what? Everybody has their moments when they're not great listeners, or maybe you didn't understand. If you can't walk in and say, hey, I'm sorry that I yelled at you, I shouldn't have lost my temper like that. I will work to do better next time. And it can't just happen like every once in a while. I feel like your kids have to hear that consistently. Like I think it's important for them to see as adults, you take responsibility for your own actions. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
And nobody's perfect.
right, it's this idea, and I think when that's not happening, when that conversation can't happen, and that's where I feel like I end up spending a lot of mental and emotional energy.
Hmm.
Because then, like the kids will come and they'll like say something to me about it. And it's like, now I'm caught in this place where I don't want to, like, you're not wrong,
Right,
but it's not appropriate for me to talk poorly about your dad to you.
right.
And so now I have to spend, in like the fraction of a second while you're standing there waiting for me to answer a question, I have to spend a ton of emotional and mental energy going, how do I answer this in a way that validates them, but also like is supportive of my spouse and doesn't paint them in a bad light.
Right.
And then more often than that's going to sit with me probably for the whole rest of the day, the
At
evening,
least.
whatever, at
Yeah.
least, at the very least.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's probably going to be days. And then inevitably I go, I really need to talk to him about this. And then I have to spend days like building myself up to be like, so, the other day, and you're just like, oh God, like it
Right.
is, it is very draining. And then like managing their emotions and kind of being like the backstop to like everything that is going to come from that, whether like, and it's just a toss of a coin, right? Is it going to be well
Right.
received or is it not?
Yeah.
Did all of the mental and emotional energy I put into crafting this conversation, was it for nothing, or is it going to land?
That's so funny that you say it like that because I kind of deal with that in like a different timeline. Like it takes a ton of emotional energy, but like I'm a little bit quicker to the conversation. And so sometimes that causes problem because I don't pause and
Mm,
like carefully craft my words. Then we put the kids to bed and I'm like, what's your problem, man? Like, why are you yelling at the kids? What's going on? Like
mhm.
this. And so then it's a little bit more in the moment. But I think that's just like the dynamics of marriage and people and
Yeah, that. it's
But then I think about, so then my energy is actually then spent on how that conversation could have gone differently had I
mm,
spent the time on the front end. So my emotional energy is at the end, and yours is at the beginning, which I think is really just interesting.
yeah, no, I agree. I think it so to explain like why it is that way. So that conversation about um when to bring things up has been like the source of many arguments in the
Oh,
past.
sure. Yeah, see,
And
like different marriages.
yeah, and it has always been like it is a very I don't necessarily agree with the way like it shakes out because I think you lose like a bit of timeliness to it. Like I should be able to say like, "Hey, why are you yelling at the kids so much?" and not have it be like it's like just a genuine question. It's not
Right.
like an attack. It's not,
For sure.
but if I say it in the moment, then that is like it's going to be an argument because it is
Right.
very poorly received. And that's been brought to my attention before. And so what ends up happening, I am like somebody who by nature, like it would naturally take me a long time to kind of like talk to
Right.
anybody about something anyway. And 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to convince myself that I just need to let it go anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's probably differences in our individual personalities, our husbands, and
Right.
like
Yeah.
how we operate as married couples.
So would you say your top couple are the same as mine? I know I only did two, but those were like the big ones.
I would say once you talked about weakness and fear the way that you did, but I was actually going to say that like always demonstrate control because that is something that like um it's funny. I remember when we were going through marriage counseling, like we had this conversation with our pastor, and it was this conversation around like control and like who gets to decide the timeline that things get done on and who basically gets to dictate the way that it gets done. And Eric and I are both um people manager type people. Like we have the capacity, and we in our jobs we are both like at a level where we manage things of our own. So I have noticed that one of us has to actively take that hat off in order for things to like go smoothly. Like if we were painting a room together, I have thoughts and opinion. Like I have a way I'm going to do this, and I have a way I'm going to project manage this shit. And like I would just assume have you come into the room and maybe like do this, 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 and this. I'm going to do this. It's going to get done in this timeline. I'm going to feel really good about it. He has the same exact mindset, and one of us has to be and by one of us I mean me, because he's much more like because and I feel like it comes down to this like, well, obviously like my way is the best
Right.
way. We
Right.
used to get in arguments about like we're not good at cooking together because like he he doesn't just like let me do it the way that I want to do it. And it's sometimes it's just different. Sometimes it is wrong. But even then it's like just unless I'm like going to like totally fuck it up, like maybe
Right.
just let
Let it
it
be.
go.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like we used to argue over like how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because he like had such a specific way he needed the like peanut butter and the jelly to be spread. And I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like take the peanut butter and jelly, like take it and eat it. Like why is this even a conversation?
To be fair, Jesse has the way that you build a sandwich in a very particular way. And so I build my sandwich however I want to build it. I just keep piling on stuff and then slap the bread on. He has like where the toppings go. But that's just like a little nuancy thing of him. He's generally a very laid back guy.
That's funny. But I think in general, the like control thing, obviously, like it plays out differently. You know, like when it's Eric and I, like we can have like a stupid little squabble
Right.
over a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or how to paint, you know, like
Yeah.
one of us can be like, this is not table stakes here. But I think it kind of goes back to the like taking responsibility for your behavior that you talked about, when like you always have to be in control and things have to get done your way, because that's what you were like, that was the expectation of you growing up. It was the expectation of all the men around you, was to always be in control of the situation and the people. It doesn't leave a lot of room for that flexibility and for like kids to be kids and to be like, I heard you tell me to do the chore this way, but in my little head, I think I could do it this way. It's totally nonsensical. I probably don't need to build a contraption to roll the trash bag to the door. But in my head, I want to. And I think it makes like way more sense than just carrying it for, you know what I'm saying? Because that's the kind of shit that kids do, right?
Right.
They're like, I hear that you told me this is a very like logical way to do it, but I actually think that I could like.
I'm wondering if I could do a handstand while I complete that task.
Correct. It's like in there's this episode of Bluey where they're doing like weekend chores, and the parents notice that like, you know, they tell the girls to tidy up their fort, and they notice that they like never walk the same. They always have some silly walk as they're putting each individual item away, so like to and from the item. And it's like, who cares if you do it
Right.
that way versus just like, so it's the control thing was probably going to be my other one, where I feel like it's and I see that play out like when we go to like his parents' house, and it's like
Mhm.
that, you know,
Right.
it's generational, it's taught, it's learned, but it's
Right.
also something that like, you know, I think just as a society, like you should always be in control of this, and
Right.
everybody should like bend well.
And we should listen, get in line.
We should listen and get in line. And then the men ended up with wives who don't want to do that, and children who are example.
You.
You take that, you can go fuck yourself with that idea, because
Uh,
um, gosh, it reminds me of this meme where it's like, it's like a Christmas carol where it's like, you know, treetops glisten and children listen, and it's like, incorrect. My children don't listen to anything.
it's true.
It's true. They just have their own, you know, and what I think we fail to recognize, some, you know, as parents on both sides of the equation, is that sometimes you just have to let them do it the way that they want to do it, because it's just their little way of sorting out the world and like
Right.
learning some independence and a skill. And just because we think we know the shortcut, like to get it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, doesn't mean that that is the most beneficial for them in that moment to like learn, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Executive functioning process.
So to kind of like tie this all up, I think it's obvious that women have a lot to gain by the patriarchy being reformed into something new, right? Better pay, equal rights, better balance at home. And like I said at the beginning, like to me, this begs the reason the question that I'm going to ask came up is because, you know, I was typing this outro and this conclusion, and I was like, you know, but men also have a lot to gain. Like, right? There's this
Right.
emotional connection with your wife and your children, and just feeling more like secure and included in your family life and all these things. And that is the idea that kind of sparked my question. And I was like, is it obvious though? Like, do they know that on a deep level? And if they do, is it a chicken and the egg question? Like, would they give up the ace in the hole to have those things? Is it so obvious to them, even on a level that they like won't admit to anybody else, that they have a lot to gain if they just like softened to some more quote unquote feminine behaviors? And even if it is obvious, are they actually going to do it? Because softening to the right, to soften to those things and to pick up more inside the household
Puts them outside of the man box.
puts them outside of the man box, is going to take time away from work, right? They're going to have to like, you're going to have to be home from work on at a consistent time. You're going to have to leave at a consistent time because you're in charge of picking up our kids every fucking day.
Right.
And you can't pick them up at 5 minutes to 6. I mean,
Nope.
you can technically. Technically daycare is open, but like you can't bring them home, at like 6:15 every single night and
And
then
feed them and homework them and wash them.
yeah, yeah, and do all of the things that we have to do. And like now we've missed activities, right?
Right.
But like then you're leaving work. You're declining meetings that people put on your calendars at the end of the day because you have to go pick up your kids.
Right.
You
It's
know,
like the men have to create a union against all of the patriarchy.
a, a fatherhood
A
union
fatherhood union.
to be like, I would also like to just leave work at a reasonable time so I can go pick up my children and assist with the things that need to get done
Right.
because
I
we're
mean,
doing.
it's like the opposite of the grass is greener on the other side. It's like they know they have it good now and they probably know that it's also really nice over there, but because they're really confident in this side, they're gonna they're gonna stay here and just feel like the consequences on the other side aren't as heavy as the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I know I used a lot of words.
A lot of analogies rolled
Yeah,
into one, but I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah, I mean, it's like looking at it and going, it's the difference between like the grass is green on both sides, but the grass on my side of the patriarchy side has a hired lawn keeper who comes and like regularly fertilizes and waters and like tends to the grounds. And like your grass is green, but out of like your own hard work and blood, sweat, and tears. And so like I see that they are both green and they look the same and they feel the same, but like you actually have to work really hard and mine just appears.
happens.
It just happens and I love it. I don't know. I don't know if I can confidently answer it.
Yeah.
I think on the surface, if I were to like ask my husband, he'd be like, of course I would
Yeah.
like, um, take a society that, doesn't force me into this man box and gives me like all these other options and like values your invisible work as much as they value my very tangible work. And I think he would be like, of course. But then if I was like, but that means that like you have to take what is it, a 27-cent pay cut for every dollar
Yeah.
you make, he'd be like,
Ooh. I don't know
hmm,
about that.
I don't know. He'd be like, well, couldn't we just pay women like the same? And then somebody be like, sorry, we can't afford to do that as it turns out. And then they'd be like, well, You know what I'm saying? Like, it sounds
Yes,
ridiculous when you put it like that, you know?
right.
You put it in those terms, but I feel like that is kind of what it comes down to, and I don't know if I can confidently answer, would they give it up?
I don't know.
Because I think as a society, particularly in American culture, we tend to think that if I get a if I have to share more of my pie, then like I'm getting a smaller slice of my pie. It's not that we're just like making a bigger pie.
Right. That's a great
So
analogy. I love that.
thanks. It's not mine.
Oh, well, it's good.
I'm going to take credit for it anyway, at
Wherever
least
you got it from.
in this context, the interwebs. All right. So that is it for the patriarchy and the mental load. I think we could unpack this for much longer.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening. Welcome to season 2. We have some amazing guests lined up and some amazing topics. So if you are a listener, rate and review. It really does help other people find our podcast. And if you could share it with a friend or a colleague, that helps us as well to
Or a
grow.
spouse.
Or
This
spouse.
episode in particular.
This episode in particular, I think your husband needs to hear that it truly does help us. So rating, reviewing, subscribing, all helps us grow and get new listeners and do some really cool things for you. So, all right, friend. See you next
Hey, we'll talk to you later.
time. Bye.